so I joined this Facebook group because I wanted to see what's going on. And I'm getting the sense that there's this level of desperation happening, where NPs are looking for, the next best thing, or their meal ticket, or urgently needing some sort of side hustle to generate money right now.
Well, hey there, it's Liz Rohr from Real World NP, and you are watching the Real World NP YouTube channel. We make weekly episodes to help save you time, frustration, and help you take the best care of your patients. I usually record intros, but I feel like, why don't we just, like, in the spirit of, like, this is just real life authenticity, people get to listen in on our conversations. Do you want to just, like, say hello? And yeah, we're just gonna, just to frame, this is gonna be super easy. We're just gonna chill convo. So go ahead.
Hey. I'm so excited and a little bit nervous to be back on the mic. It's been kind of a long time for me since I've recorded a podcast at all. And it's been a hot minute since you and I have recorded a podcast.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. It's odd. I feel like I took a break, and I feel like we were just, and I don't know about you, but I feel like this year has just been so interesting. I'm kind of an astrology woo-woo person, and there's been some astrological big things happening this year. Who knows if that's the cause, but I just feel like there's been a huge shift for me and a lot of other people. And I wonder if that's been the case for you. But like, when you and I first met each other was because we both have our company, so Real World NP, and you have the ResumeRX. And I don't know, I feel like we were just on this specific path. And then I feel like something just has really shifted. So yeah, it's been a minute. So it's just nice to talk to you. So I think the thing that our aim for today was really just, one of the things I want to do with this podcast season is, one thing that I'm really noticing, I should say, is that, I don't know, just the landscape in general has changed, where it's like not just us feeling that way. It's not just online business feeling that way. It really feels like clinics are like that, whether it's because of COVID, it's because it's kind of like the first generations of new NPs that are coming out of COVID times. I don't know, but I feel like you and I wanted to have you on to just have we have so many chats about just NP life and NP career stuff, and you have so much insight and wisdom, and I just wanted it to be like a chat. So I think that one of the things that you and I talked about is, are NPs okay? You said that off camera, off recording, but say more about that.
Yeah. So I agree. When we first connected, we were very much talking about practical strategies on how to navigate clinical things, how to navigate job searching, like very much this silo of, here's your clinical world in this little bubble. Here's your job search in this little bubble. How do we have the best work-life balance? And it was sunshiny.
Yeah.
And I feel like since COVID, and even in this post-COVID world is a disaster also, right?
Yeah.
The world is very heavy. It seems like one serious tragedy or trauma after another. And I don't know, we can't just talk about this insulated world anymore of, okay, here's NP school, here's studying for your board, sunshiny, get a job. It's in
here's
such a bigger context.
To get a job. Here's how to, and all those things are still relevant, of course, but yeah, you can't talk about one without the other. Sorry, go ahead. I get excited and I interrupt.
I love it. But yeah, that's what I was thinking when you asked me, what should we talk about today? I'm just wondering, are NPs okay? And what sparked this idea was I recently joined a Facebook group that's side hustles for nurse practitioners, because I just wanted to see what's going on. What are people asking about? What are they looking for outside of the traditional, NP Facebook groups, which are more clinically focused and a little bit more insulated. And
can I just add that they're kind of a dumpster fire? I don't know which ones you're in, but
no, they're all dumpster
in the
fires.
last 4 years, they've become a dumpster fire. And I really feel badly that there's not really much to offer. And no offense if you have one of those Facebook groups, it's not about you. It's just, I think that there's a cultural aspect of where people are at, and then it's not great.
Great. No, I totally agree. And unfortunately, it's also where so many of us kind of keep a pulse on our profession, right? Because we're so kind of on our own island so often in the clinical environments we work in. And, especially with COVID, it's like we all went online to really find
Mhm.
that community. And I'm not really sure that the in-person communities have been rebuilt. And even for NPs, I've talked about this before. If you're not working on a floor, as a staff nurse, where you're
Mm.
working with so many other nurses all day, every
Yeah.
day, you're
Yeah.
not getting that same sense of community as an NP, which is, a little bit of a sidecar. But
Yeah.
so I joined this Facebook group because I wanted to see what's going on. And I'm getting the sense that there's this level of desperation
Mm.
happening, where NPs are looking for the next best thing, or their meal ticket, or urgently
Mhm.
needing some sort of side hustle to generate money right
Mm.
now. And I think it, opens up a bigger conversation to, first of all, are the NP jobs that exist, are the employers doing right by them?
Yeah.
Are we providing livable wages? I hope there's a whole other conversation about, NPs as household contributors and caregivers, that type of thing. But also, like, there's this desperation for money, and like what's going on in our economy, what's going on
Mm.
in terms of like how can we support each other. I don't know. This is kind of what my feeling is these days,
Mm.
and it's what I've been noodling on and thinking about, and how I can, show up for NPs and help them. What do people need right now? Where
Mm.
is the struggle? Because I don't get the sense that everyone's in a great place.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because it's like, have people withdrawn from online spaces because people are just over being on screens? Or is it just like the energy to have extra energy outside of the working space to like join a forum and talk about topics versus like the only thing that's going to bring me online into this Facebook group is to be like, "Ah, I fucking need, oh, watch my language. I really need some help." We're getting real casual here. These are the real conversations being recorded. Um, but yeah, it's just yeah, and I guess like I think when I've made podcasts in the past, I feel or just like any sort of content, I kind of have this feeling of like I need to be this leader that has all the answers. And not that I'm not a leader, and not that you and I are not leaders in our field, just by nature of being nurse practitioners, of being public faces, having a lot of experience, right? But like at the same time, I think it's also okay for us to just talk about, I don't know, just talk about what's real and what the feelings are and not necessarily have all the answers. It's like yeah, it's just it's interesting. I guess like so what do you make of that? Like where do you feel like that kind of has you thinking about I guess are you in kind of like a data gathering phase of trying to understand what's going on with people? Do you feel like that has you thinking about where this profession is going? Like what are your where are you in that kind of process of thinking about that?
Yeah, I think mostly, my initial response is usually to be like, okay, how can I help? Where do I fit into
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
conversation? How can I assist? And I have noticed
Mm.
that, with content for the ResumeRX, I'm not putting out my podcast anymore.
Mhm.
Um, Things, are kind of living on in this way that, I have so much content that I continue to share because it's still there. But when I'm thinking about creating new content, I kind
Mm.
of feel like out of touch, not out of touch, but like I'm not really sure. It feels silly for me to create new content about resumes
Mm.
and job interviews and
Mhm. Mhm.
negotiating, because I just feel like
Mhm.
the context is so much bigger these days. And
Yeah.
um, it also makes me wonder, like, all right, are NPs looking for new solutions on how to use their talents?
Mm. Mhm.
Right. It's made me wonder, we can talk about this more, but in my new day job, I
Mhm.
talk with NPs all day who are mostly starting their own businesses, starting their own practices specifically. And it's made me wonder, okay, is there a need for more content on how to start your own telemedicine practice, or how to start your own
Mhm.
brick and mortar practice? But then I worry that, people will latch onto that as kind of a get rich quick type of
Mhm, mhm,
scheme, when in reality, and you and I both know
mm,
that starting any sort of business, it takes a while for you to be profitable
yeah,
and to start paying yourself. And it's not this big kind of pie in the sky dream that some unethical marketers like to
yeah,
advertise it as.
yeah, absolutely, and I think you said before we started recording was that you're sort of noticing a trend of, like, some people are like, "Yeah, I really wanna start a business, I really wanna start my own practice," And they're taking those kind of intentional pathway steps forward. And then you have like some other people who are kind of presenting as like this like grasping place of desperation. And I guess the thing that's kind of coming to me as we're talking about this is like, I think one of the big shifts, thankfully, I've noticed some of this with real world NP, like interacting with the community. I don't know if I've had any influence. If I have, amazing. But if not, maybe that's just like the larger perspective. But I feel like I'm hearing a lot more people doing making self-honoring choices.
Mm.
Where like, for example, when I would post, I used to do this a lot more regularly on Instagram, posting the stories of like, share your weekly wins. And a lot of it would be very much like I passed my boards and I got a new job and stuff like that. And all the things are beautiful and they still come through. But I'm seeing a lot more people being like, you know what, I said no. I left my toxic job. I
Mhm.
stopped work, even though I had more things that I had to do. I took care of myself today. Like I made fun plans for this weekend, even though I have all these notes to finish. So I guess we're kind of just mulling over what's going on right now. Is that like, are the tides kind of like on the one hand, are people really struggling still because they are like, is the reason they're in desperation is because of COVID times? Is it because their jobs are not paying them equitably? Are they still in that kind of like hustle culture? Or is it that like, I don't know, maybe people are just kind of over it because of the 2020s that have been so far, versus like, yeah, is this like the direction that our profession is moving as people are just, I don't know, making more of those self-honoring choices? And how do we support people, I guess, in doing that? Because like, I think that's one of the things that like making this new podcast season is talking a lot more about life and a lot more about balance. And I've even noticed that. So Brianna on my team does group mentorship cohorts, and a lot of the topics that they're talking about now are so much less clinical and so much more about balance in life
Mm.
and making this work. So I don't know. I guess where I'm at right now is just I feel like a lot of heart heaviness, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I also like have this like impulse to be like, what are the answers? What do we do from here?
Right. Which isn't always the right direction to go. It's like
Yeah.
that whole question, which, when you hear a complaint from someone, this works really well in like interpersonal relationships. Do you need support or solutions?
Yes.
Right.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
for those of us who tend to be very solution oriented, it's like, all right, I see the problem. I've assessed the problem. Now let me hypothesize the solutions. Right. But
Hmm.
like sometimes we just need to hold space for the things that are coming up and, honoring the people who are making self-honoring choices and applauding that, because I think that, what COVID has taught so many of us is to ask ourselves a question of
Mm.
what's it all for?
Yeah.
I know that's been like a big existential question that has come up for me.
Oh my God, me too.
What's it all for?
Yeah.
What is worth my time? What is most important to me? And it's too bad that we had to go through that collective experience for that to, you know, really become a priority. But I think that it has, and I hope that it has, and so I hope that people are continuing to ask that question as they navigate their careers and continue to ditch the toxic work environments and to make more of these choices that help them figure out what's important. I just get a little bit nervous in the context of today's economy. And,
Yeah.
I'm seeing, so in one of the other Facebook groups, I'm such a lurker. In one of the other Facebook groups I'm in, that's all about remote nursing jobs.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Almost every day I see a post of my company is laying off, hundreds of employees,
Yeah.
nurses who are getting laid off from their remote jobs. And so I don't know, it just makes me a little bit nervous to realize the kind of power play of like who holds the power right now. Is it the
Mm.
employee or the employer? Right. And I feel like over time that goes back and forth. And historically it goes back and forth. And it just makes me wonder, okay, where are we at now? Um,
Mm.
because I feel like during COVID, for healthcare workers, healthcare worker employees had the power,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
But now I'm sensing a shift in the other direction, um, which, has me feeling a little bit uneasy and wondering how best to guide people, um, because, the power has shifted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I know it's just so it's so tricky because then people also talk about like I have loan repayment that I have to manage. And that's like it's not just about my regular paychecks, it's about my, you know, my mortgage or my kids or myself or yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that one thing that's really kind of coming up, I think, for both of us is that there are really concrete things that we can control, right, in our lives, and those are things that, like, for example, like your business and my business, like both help people with, right? So people, regardless of the economy of the world at large, like if we are working as a nurse practitioner, we're probably going to need to do some lab interpretation, right, depending on our role. So it's like, okay, that still is like a service, a help. Those are tools, those are concrete things that we can control in our lives. Right. And then for you, for example, like you're helping people with resumes and interviewing and negotiations and stuff like that. And also, I think kind of the theme of what we're leading towards is like, it's not, or like what we're kind of both thinking about right now is that it's not just about, there's like a bigger question, a bigger landscape and a bigger perspective that I think I'm feeling like a lot of other people are bringing this to the profession too, of like, what is like discernment actually look like, which I feel like is maybe like a total turn from things that we've talked about before, but it's like, so I paused recording for a sec just to check in, and you were saying about how, I think it would be really helpful to share like what it looks like behind the scenes of like, and I can share too of my process as well, but like you and I have been both in this place for a couple of years of like really like, personal development and discernment of like what it is that like makes us happy and fulfilled. And like there's a both and there of like, yes, we all have to kind of pay the bills and we can also take actionable steps and at least hold on to hope and striving towards something that's like the most fulfilling for us. So yeah, do you want to share, I guess, in terms of like, you know, turning towards like a more like potentially, optimistic and hopeful perspective on what we're talking about, like what is your process been over the last couple of years when it comes to being in that place? Like, because I feel like you've been in that place of like, gosh, I feel like you'd be comfortable with me saying this, but like, I like, do I have the money this month to pay the things that I need to pay for, right? Like, so you have the financial pressures, and then you have the life pressures, and then you have like, am I happy in this job? Like things like that. Yeah. What do you want to share about that?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll say that, for a good 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, the Resume RX was really my primary focus in terms of my time and my work. It was, the primary source of income for kind of my contribution to the household. And it really was a great solution for me after my youngest was born. So she's now 4. But really, the first 2.5, 3 years of her life, this was, my main focus. And it was also kind of during COVID in a time when, we were all online, and it really, it worked out, right? It was something that I had done on the side that I always believed in, that I could do if it was my primary thing, but I was just too afraid to do it. And it
Right.
was
Totally.
COVID that forced me
Hmm.
into it. And in hindsight, I'm glad that it gave me that push because, I saw tremendous success in the business. And, a little over a year ago, I would say, like, I kind of, and we talked about this a lot, you and I got into this existential questioning situation of, okay, how fulfilling is this business to me? Is it serving me in all the ways that I need it to? Which, as you mentioned, like, is it financially serving me? Is it, serving me from a place of fulfillment? Do I have new and important things to say? And I felt like I kind of got a little, I won't, burnout is too strong of a word, but a little indifferent towards the things that I was teaching on and talking about. So I made, some decisions of what was going to be next. And this was coupled with the fact that I moved to a new state. And after, not working clinically for 3 years, I'm going to be up for recertification in a couple years. And I knew that I had to get some clinical hours. So this was kind of all this one big decision of, oh, maybe it's time to, dip my toe back into clinical practice. So I kind
And
of,
just to pause you for a second for people
yeah,
who don't know you, like you were an NP in the ER setting for about 11 years, is that right?
um, a
Before you
little,
started?
a little less than that. So I've been an NP now for 12 years total.
Oh,
So,
okay. Okay.
so I was probably working for 5 years before, 5 or 6 years before I then took a step back from clinical practice to
I see. I
do
see.
the ResumeRX full time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So sorry. So catching
Yes.
back up. So you step back into clinical practice because you're due for recertification. So take
Mhm.
us from there.
Yes. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do from a clinical perspective. I happen to have a mentor and former faculty member who lives near to me here in Connecticut who said, "Hey, come work for my practice one day a week." So I started doing that with her. I also picked up a job doing in home health risk assessments for a company that contracts with Medicare. So I, was doing that per diem. And then in the job with my mentor, I was also learning some aesthetics. And so I decided to open my own aesthetics practice so that I could take care of people who were close to me because there's kind of some distance issues. But long story short, I was kind of navigating these 3 different clinical jobs over the past, up until the summer, up until this past summer for about a year, and kind of figuring out, all right, what am I liking? What am I not liking? Still
Mhm.
working on the ResumeRX, but it, taking up less of my time and kind of feeling things out. And honestly, this is something that I felt embarrassed to talk about because I made some decisions to stop doing some of those jobs. And,
Mhm.
the primary care piece isn't where my heart is. It's not
Mhm.
as fulfilling to me as other things. So, kind of fast forward to this past summer, I was still part-time in most of these jobs. And a full-time opportunity came my way, a full-time opportunity to work from home, working for a company that helps nurse practitioners get set up with collaborating physicians. And, for so many reasons, I couldn't believe how perfect this opportunity was for me. It really was a great marriage of my clinical knowledge plus my experience mentoring NPs plus my experience in sales and marketing from my own job, my own business rather. So over the summer, I started that job at the end of June and decided to cut ties with the health risk assessment job, and then also like really dial back to the point where I'm only seeing like a handful of patients telehealth through the practice with my mentor. I'm still doing aesthetics like on a Saturday morning for a few hours. But really my full-time focus now is an actual full-time employed job, a 40-hour a week position. It happens to be work from home with some flexibility, which I'm super grateful for, especially because I do have 3 young kids who need to be taken places. And, I have a husband with a 2-hour each way commute into New York City who, isn't always able to help with those things. So that's kind of where I've been the past few months. And I feel like things are falling into place for me. It means that I'm, still not working full-time clinically. And honestly, I just don't think that that's my place anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I feel like my brain and my talents are still being put to excellent use and are just better suited in um, these types of non-clinical roles that I've been fortunate enough to have. So that's the scoop.
Mm. I love that. Well, I love that for so many reasons. One, obviously, because I'm just super happy for you to become more just aligned. I know it's like such a buzzword, but so much more aligned with like who you are, what you want, and what your skill set is. And also, like, I just love, I love your willingness to share that. So honestly, because I think that, and I said this before we were recording, that you and I have been in this world of like personal development for so long, that I think sometimes it can be really novel for people to think, because I think at least before I started on this kind of journey, starting the business and all that stuff, it was like, yeah, like I went to college, I went to grad school, I got my job as a nurse practitioner in primary care, and then I burnt out. And I was like, hold on, what? Like, this is what I thought I wanted to do. And this is like kind of like the script, like the life script, like
Mhm.
Kate Donovan, who has the Burnout podcast. I did an interview with her that will be released, I think, before this comes out. But but yeah, it's kind of like that, the script of like what we're supposed to do and like what we're
Yes.
supposed to be, quotation marks if you're listening instead of watching, but what we're supposed to do or what we're supposed to want, and that we're like somehow have failed because like this thing doesn't excite us anymore that we used to want to do, or maybe we just reach this place and it's like, oh, that's actually not for me anymore, you know? So I just really love that, telling that story, just like it's helpful for other people to see, especially if they're the only nurse practitioner in their family, or they don't really have a ton of connections or things like that. So it's such a wonderful example for people. And then I think also, I think it really speaks to, and the thing that came to me as you were talking is like, I've done a lot of work that I haven't done an episode on this. I don't know if that would be helpful for people, but I touched on my own burnout that I've had this year when I did that episode with Kate Donovan, the burnout coach. And I think I've been in so many of those conversations myself that I really want to normalize for other people. If you feel like your life has been totally upended this year and you're just like,
Mm,
what am I like? What do I care about? What is this for? Like, I think one of the coaches that I'm working with, Louise Duran, was talking. She's like, you know what? I just have this. She's a sociologist, and she's like, I just feel like this is going to come out later, but like there's just been this collective shift for everybody of just like, I'm not willing to put up with stuff anymore.
yeah.
Like I'm just, there's like, I just, we need to do the things that are going to make us happy. And I think that seeing how quickly life can change or life can be taken away in such a dramatic way is just like, yeah, it's just really shifted things. And I think it's really made us more clear about, a lot of us rather, more clear or more questioning about what our priorities are, you
Yeah.
know? So I guess, yeah, I love that that is really hopefully normalizing for a lot of people if they're just like in this crisis mode of like, oh my gosh, like I went to school for so long and I thought I wanted to do this thing and now I'm not really happy. And, what if I leave this job, that means I'm like, quote unquote, quitting. And it's like, you and I
Mm,
have talked about that as like, a number of times is like, what is that like almost like mean about you as a person,
yeah.
and it doesn't have to mean anything. It's just a thing. And like, you can, like for me, like I've stepped away from clinical practice because of running the company and I moved and all this stuff. And it's like, I've had a lot of feelings about it. And it's like, you know what? I can always go back. I can go back another time. Like I've actually been interested in going back lately, but it's like only because I gave myself space, think
Yeah.
about, I actually miss it, and I want to do this thing. And it doesn't mean, yeah, it just doesn't mean anything about us, what choices we make.
Yeah. It's like that question to ask yourself, what are you making this mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is, and I don't know if it's because I'm, a perfectionist kind of people pleaser, teacher's pet type, which I think,
Struggle
many
with.
who are listening or can
Yeah.
probably relate to, but I have all this self-judgment about my choices, and some of it is reflected in real experience. Um, and so I actually like have been through this process before, interestingly enough, because as we've talked about, I'm a second degree nurse, right? So I have in undergrad, I studied two things. I studied Italian language and I studied violin because growing up, like
I
my
love that.
thing, I had a couple things growing up. Like one of
Mm-hmm.
them was playing violin. The other one was like being the smart kid. And so it was kind of like the expectation for me was to go to college and to study violin and to become a music teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like that's just the
Mm-hmm.
obvious thing to do. So that was the path. And that's what I did for 4 years until like I realized that in my first education course, I was like, oh, I don't want to be a music teacher. So I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going like the performance path instead of the education path. But my senior year, getting ready to graduate, was when I decided to apply to nursing school. And I dealt with that and that, self criticism of, oh, Amanda, are you just going to throw away
Mm-hmm.
these 2 degrees that you have? And like, I even heard that verbatim from one of my faculty members who was
Oof.
like, you are throwing away all this work. You are throwing away this talent of yours. You're throwing this away to pursue something else. Um, and so like I think that's part of like it just got like ingrained in my head, right? And so that um is part of this self-criticism. And then, when I stepped away from clinical practice during COVID, I dealt with a big struggle with all of that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
part of it, mom, I hope you're not listening to this, is from my mom who would say like, oh, but you have to keep, this isn't
Mm.
forever. You have to keep your skills fresh.
Yeah, that's a
She just
common
retired from being a
narrative.
nurse
Yeah.
for forever.
Yeah.
And like even to this day, like
Mm-hmm.
with all that I have to show for myself and my accomplishments and in my field with my own business and kind of everything that I've done, it's still like, oh, are you keeping your skills fresh? You're not going to have any credibility if you don't actually
Mm-hmm.
practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that hurts, right? But
Yeah.
that's also like a script that is in
Yeah.
my head
Yeah.
and is a frequent, piece of my own self judgment and self criticism. What
Totally.
are you all going to think of me? Do I not
Mm-hmm.
have any credibility anymore
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I'm not in the trenches?
Totally.
And I've chosen to have, a cushy clinical job that I have 100% control over.
Yeah.
And then, another full-time job that's really not clinical at all. Um,
Totally. And I really
so
appreciate being so candid about that because like it's such a narrative, I think, in our profession where it's like that's like the line. It's like said in the same way. It's like, I don't know where that
Mhm.
script came from, but keeping your skills up, like you know what I mean? Like your credibility and keeping your skills up, like that's just such a narrative. And I think it's really important that we talk about that stuff because yes, on the one hand, when I am, for example, like in COVID, peak COVID, when all the medications, were coming out, of like treatments and stuff like that. It was just like, yeah, it would come to me, much faster off the top of my head if I was prescribing that medicine every single day. Right. But it's like, oh, okay. Like whether it's myself or it's somebody else, like once you become a nurse practitioner, you have a skill set, you have a knowledge base, and medicine changes all the time. Right. And then
Yeah.
we get to step back in if we want to. Right. So there's like that factual aspect. And then it's like, also, this is just a narrative and a script and a judgment that our profession has, and it doesn't mean anything about anybody. So yeah, yeah, I really feel like I'm very hopeful that what I'm noticing is like I feel like people are making more self-honoring choices, and I just really hope that that trend continues where it's not just about the grind, about following a script, about doing what is, quote unquote, you're supposed to do, and that people can just make the choices that make them happy, right? Because that's like the fast track to burnout. If you add everything that's happened, I just feel like my threshold, it seems like everybody else's threshold is much lower for I think I have an E rating on this podcast, so I'm gonna try not to swear like BS basically. But yeah, I guess I'm hopeful about that. And yeah, I don't know. It just feels like a weird time. I don't
Yeah.
know. Feels like something's coming. Hopefully something's going to shift. Are you into astrology things? I feel like you're a little bit into
No,
astrology things.
not at
What?
not at all.
Okay.
You can feel free to educate, not because I like don't like it. It's like not on my radar.
Okay,
Like
so
I'm a Leo. That's all I can tell you about astrology. Like
okay, this is
literally all I can tell you.
this is like a total turn on the usual stuff we talk about, but just real quick, I'm going to put in something. There's an app called The Pattern. It's a paid app, unfortunately, but I think you should definitely check it out. And it's talking about kind of like these big events that have happened and stuff for this year. And, obviously, what is that, power of suggestion or something? Like
Mm.
people can be influenced by that, right? But I feel like I've felt a lot of things coming. I'm just, a very sensitive person, but you should definitely
So
check
are you
it out.
feeling some good things coming? Because I hope so.
I think that's what I'm hoping. I think that's what I'm hoping. I'm deciding how candid to get on this. I do a lot of woo-woo stuff. I do a lot more woo-woo things than I kind of talk about with Real World NP, but there are some maybe I can share with you separately because I don't know if that's the vibe of people listening, but yeah, there are some things that have me feeling more hopeful. So
Okay, good. Good. I'm eager to hear those
totally.
those things.
Totally. And you know what? I think actually, I don't know if there's anything to say on this, but I'm just thinking about when this is going to come out. And I think the plan is probably after the new year. We're going to take well, at this point, when it's been released, there will have been a kind of a pause at the end of December and leading into the new year. And I feel like there's always this vibe of like fresh start. And so something just popped into my head about that. And I don't know, do you have any thoughts about that? Like with the new year or I don't know, just any thoughts, any guidance, any wisdom, are
Yeah,
you still just in a wait and see phase? I just feel like you have so much, that's why I'm like just trying to like pull it out of you and you're just like, I don't know, but I don't know.
I feel like I have always been that person
Mm,
to be like, what's next? What's the
mhm,
next big thing?
Mhm.
What am I working towards next? What's the
Mhm.
next thing to conquer?
Mhm.
And, over the past couple months specifically, I've been trying to make a conscious effort to, instead of saying what's next, to say
Mhm.
what's enough. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's like the question that I'm asking myself right now. Like, I don't have to be focused on what my next big career move is or my next big
Mm.
accomplishment, but rather, what's enough? What's enough money? What's enough work? What's enough in kind of all different aspects? Because, I'm really trying to be more present and more satisfied, which
Totally.
is difficult for me. It does not come
Yeah.
easily. So that's kind of that's the next big thing for me to conquer is getting to the point where I am satisfied. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I've been doing a bunch of like I mean, I've with you about this, but liberation work with Weeze Duran, and I can link to her stuff. She's amazing. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we talked about is that this like hustle culture, hustle mentality, kind of constant achievement is really just it's just it's like a tool that keeps us separated from who we are and our humanity and what fulfills us and what makes us actually really happy. So
mhm.
yeah, centering joy and peace and fulfillment sounds really lovely. So
Yes.
thank you so much for chatting with me. This is very off the cuff and very impromptu, so I appreciate all your wisdom always. But
Yes. Thanks for
um,
having me.
yeah, whenever you want to come back, maybe we'll do some regular stuff. We were
Yeah.
chatting some stuff before, but yeah, times are weird. So
Well, you know where to find me. I'm always up for it. I get to dust off my microphone and I
excellent.
won't put it too far away.
Cool. Thank you.